What made me run to police in pajamas at 2 a.m.? Peter's poker friends were in my bed again, one behind me, one running his fingers through my hair, whispering about patience and waiting. Fourth night alone with just me and 4-year-old Sophia while her parents were in Aspen. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just waited for them to fall asleep. At 2 a.m., they were finally snoring. I slipped out, grabbed Sophia from her crib. She was wheezing, needed her nebulizer, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The front door was alarmed, windows too, but the garage had a pet door from the previous owner's dog. I pushed Sophia through first, her tiny body barely fitting, then squeezed myself through, skin scraping on the metal edges. No shoes, no coat, just pajamas and a sick toddler in Minnesota winter. The police station was 2 miles. I ran carrying Sophia, her breathing getting worse with each block. My feet went numb, then burned, then nothing. Blood on the snow behind us. A car slowed beside us. My heart stopped. Was it them? But an elderly woman rolled down her window. "Honey, what are you doing?" "Police," I gasped. "Please." She drove us the last mile. Sophia was turning blue. I burst through the station doors, startling the desk officer. "Help us, please." Peter and Jess Harrison's house. They're friends. In my bed. Every night. The officer's face changed when I said the Harrisons' name. "Let's call your foster parents to pick you up. They're the ones they left me alone with these men. The Harrisons are respected members. Check Sophia." I held her out. "She can't breathe. She needs her medicine." That's what saved us. Not my story. Sophia's medical emergency. The EMTs arrived for her, and a different officer, a woman, saw my feet. Frostbite. Cuts from running on frozen concrete. She started documenting before anyone could stop her. "How long did you run?" 2 miles. "In pajamas? Why?" The desk officer tried interrupting, but she held up her hand. Let her speak. I told her everything. The poker friends, the cameras Peter installed in my room, my shower, the outfit he made me wear, how they'd taken me from good foster parents with false accusations. "Can you prove any of this?" "The cameras are still recording." She drove to the house herself, found the men in my bed, found the cameras, found videos on Peter's computer. But here's what really ended it: Sophia's medical records. The EMTs discovered she'd been deliberately under-medicated for months. Her prescriptions were filled but barely used. They'd been making her sicker to keep me busy, isolated, dependent. Peter and Jess returned from Aspen to find police at their house. They tried the same routine: respected family, troubled foster child, misunderstanding. Then the officer showed them their own security footage. The men in my bed, me trying to push them away, audio of what they said. "She's lying about, your cameras recorded everything, Mr. and Harrison." My real foster parents had been fighting false charges for 3 weeks. The case collapsed within hours once police saw what had really been happening. But some damage doesn't undo. I still can't sleep in a room with the door closed. Still check corners for cameras. Still wake up at 2 a.m. ready to run. The poker friends claimed they thought I was 18, that Peter said I was willing. 2 got probation, 1 got 6 months, Peter got 3 years, Jess got 2. Sophia's with her grandmother now. She breathes normally with proper medication. My foster parents, my real parents, sleep outside my door some nights when the nightmares are bad. They've never asked for details I haven't offered. Just promised I'll never be taken again. The social worker who removed me sends apology letters. I don't open them. Because here's what no one talks about. I wasn't the first. They found evidence of 3 other girls over 8 years. Different states, different names, same pattern. All taken from good homes with false reports. All placed with the Harrisons through connections. All ran away or aged out before anyone believed them. I was just the first one who ran to police carrying proof. A dying child whose medical neglect couldn't be denied. Sometimes I wonder about those other girls. Where they ran. If they made it. If anyone ever believed them. The envelope showed up 3 days after the 1-year mark. No return address. But I knew the handwriting from the monthly updates. Inside was a photo of Sophia on a swing set. Her face bright with laughter. Cheeks pink from playing outside. Her grandmother always careful not to show any landmarks or street signs that might give away where they lived now. I was standing in the cereal aisle at Target when I opened it and the tears just came. An older woman asked if I was okay, and I nodded, clutching the photo like it might disappear. That night, something strange happened. I went to bed at 11 and woke up at 3:30 in the morning, which meant I'd slept 4 hours straight without jolting awake at 2. My foster mom found me still in my actual bed when she came to check on me at 6 instead of curled up on the floor by the door where I usually ended up. She brought me coffee and we sat there not talking about it, but both knowing this was huge. The phone rang while I was eating breakfast and Catherine's name showed up on the screen. She had a new case, another girl in Ohio with the same pattern, foster parents with connections who'd gotten her placed with them after false reports. The prosecutor there wanted to know if I'd talked to them about what worked in our case. What evidence made the difference? I said yes before my brain could catch up with my mouth. The call happened 2 days later and I stuck to facts, told them about the cameras being the key evidence, how the medical records for Sophia proved the pattern of neglect. The prosecutor took notes and mentioned 3 other states were looking at similar networks now. Our case had opened doors nobody knew existed. Sang scheduled our next session and said he wanted to try something different, see if I could handle having my bedroom door fully closed during therapy. I made it 8 minutes before the walls started closing in and my chest got tight, but that was 5 minutes longer than last month when we'd tried. He reminded me that getting better wasn't a straight line. Some days would be harder than others. A week later, Zenaida called to warn me that a letter from Peter had been forwarded through official channels since the restraining order meant he couldn't contact me directly. She'd already opened it to check the contents and confirmed it was more manipulation dressed up as an apology, talking about how sorry he was, but also hinting that I'd misunderstood things. We shredded it together over video call, feeding each page into her office shredder while she reminded me that abusers always try to rewrite history. My foster dad knocked on my door the next morning holding a box from Amazon. Asked if we could talk about home security. He wanted to install a doorbell camera, but only if I was comfortable with it. Showed me exactly how it worked and gave me the login so I'd have full control. I could delete any footage, turn it off whenever I wanted, see who was outside before opening the door. For the first time since everything happened, a camera actually made me feel safer instead of watched. Alejandro's email came through while I was helping my foster mom make dinner. The subject line just said update, but the contents made me drop the knife I was holding. 2 more of Peter's poker friends had been arrested in Kansas for doing the same thing to another girl, and the FBI was now involved because it crossed state lines. Our case had broken open something way bigger than just Peter and Jess. There was a whole network of people using the foster system to traffic kids. Community college registration opened, and I signed up for 2 classes, just English and psychology to start slow. The campus counselor already had my accommodation letter that said I needed to sit near exits and could leave class if I had a panic attack. My first day, I picked a seat by the door and made it through both classes without leaving, even answered a question in English about narrative structure. The professor smiled when I raised my hand like she'd been hoping I would participate. 3 weeks into the semester, another package arrived from Sophia's grandmother. But this time when I opened it, there was a DVD inside. I put it in my laptop and there was Sophia singing a song about butterflies, her voice clear and strong with no wheezing at all. She did a little dance at the end and waved at the camera saying for my friend, because her grandmother hadn't told her my name for safety reasons. I watched it 20 times that first day, saved copies to my phone, my laptop, uploaded it to 3 different cloud services because I never wanted to lose proof that she was okay, that she was breathing normally and growing up happy. The video became my reminder on bad days that running through that pet door had saved us both. 2 days later, my foster mom called me into the living room where the local news was playing on TV. There was our old house, the garage visible in the background, and a reporter standing in front talking about new foster care reform bills making their way through the state legislature. They didn't say my name, but showed the pet door, now sealed with a metal plate and painted over. My stomach did this weird flip seeing it on screen, like watching my escape route turn into something historical, something that happened instead of something still happening in my head every night. The reporter mentioned how our case had exposed massive gaps in oversight and led to emergency funding for investigations. My foster dad put his hand on my shoulder real gentle, and I managed not to flinch away. The next morning, Birgit showed up at our door carrying a box of chocolates from that fancy place downtown. She sat at our kitchen table spreading out papers while I made coffee, her hands moving fast as she explained what the federal audit had uncovered. 8 CPS workers had been fired already, 12 more suspended pending investigation, and they were putting in new oversight protocols that would require home visits every 2 weeks for high-risk placements. We ate the entire box of chocolates while she walked me through how the donation trail from Peter's poker games had triggered the federal investigation, money moving through fake charities into offshore accounts. Real change was happening, she kept saying. Actual structural change that would protect other kids. That whole week, I noticed something different about my nights. Instead of checking the door locks 5 or 6 times before bed, I only checked twice, then once more around midnight when I woke up. My foster parents noticed but didn't make a big deal about it, just left my favorite tea on the kitchen counter every morning, this fancy stuff with lavender that was supposed to help with anxiety. These small victories mattered more than the big court wins sometimes. Thursday afternoon, Zenaida called to say someone wanted to talk to me, one of the other girls from Peter's past who'd seen the news coverage. She was 32 now, lived in Oregon with her husband and 2 kids, had a job as a nurse. Zenaida put her on speaker, and this woman's voice came through, steady and calm, telling me she wanted me to know it gets better, that she'd built a whole life after what happened to her at 15. Hearing that she'd made it through, had a family and career and normal life, gave me this hope I didn't even know I'd been missing. The civil settlement paperwork came through the following Monday in a thick envelope that required signature confirmation. Zenaida had negotiated enough money to cover therapy for the next 5 years, plus all my college expenses, and she'd made sure there was no gag order attached to it. I could keep speaking about the systemic issues, keep pushing for change without worrying about legal consequences. The number on the check made my hands shake, but Zenaida reminded me this wasn't charity or luck. This was accountability for what they'd done. Catherine called that afternoon with her own news. She'd been promoted to head of the entire victim advocacy department. She wanted to take me to lunch to celebrate and asked if I'd consider doing a summer internship with her team. We went to this Italian place downtown, and she ordered us both huge plates of pasta while explaining how the internship would work. Flexible hours around my therapy schedule. Real experience helping other survivors navigate the system. I surprised myself by saying maybe instead of no. A week later, a package showed up with no return address, just my first name written in neat handwriting on brown paper. Inside were 3 journals, each one filled with different handwriting, stories from other survivors that Catherine's network had collected anonymously. I spent the whole night reading them, these stories of recovery and setback and slow progress forward. One woman wrote about how she still couldn't wear turtlenecks 10 years later. Another described learning to trust her boyfriend enough to sleep in the same bed. Reading their words made me feel less alone in this specific kind of broken that's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. Sang brought up trying something called EMDR at our next session, said it might help with the body memories that made me jump when people got too close. The first session was rough, following this light back and forth while remembering the feeling of hands in my hair. But afterward, something felt different. When my foster mom touched my shoulder later to tell me dinner was ready, I didn't pull away. Progress came in these tiny moments that nobody else would even notice. Right before Christmas, a card arrived from the elderly woman who'd driven us to the police station that night. She'd been following the case in the news and wanted me to know how proud she was of my bravery, how glad she was that she'd been driving by at exactly the right moment. I'd never written her back before, but this time I sat down and wrote a real letter, thanking her for saving our lives, telling her about Sophia breathing normally now. 2 days after Christmas, Alejandro called with news about Jess. She'd been transferred to minimum security after agreeing to cooperate with federal investigators, giving them names and details about the whole network. Part of me was angry that she got privileges for doing what she should have done anyway, but Alejandro reminded me that her testimony was helping convict dozens of others across multiple states. Justice was more complicated than I'd thought it would be. The next week, I found myself typing a fake name into a support group website Catherine had mentioned, my fingers shaking as I clicked join on the Tuesday night meeting link. 20 faces appeared on my laptop screen, all survivors like me, and when they went around introducing themselves, I just typed in the chat that I was new and scared. Nobody pushed for more. We spent an hour sharing tips for dealing with nightmares and panic attacks, practical stuff like keeping ice packs by the bed to shock yourself back to reality when flashbacks hit. I logged off feeling less alone for the first time in months. My foster mom knocked on my door the next morning holding paint samples, asking if maybe I wanted to make my room feel more like mine instead of just a place I slept. We drove to the hardware store and I picked bright yellow, the loudest color they had, nothing like the beige walls at Peter's house. My foster dad spent the whole weekend helping me paint, not saying much but letting me control the music and take breaks whenever I needed. We moved all the furniture to the middle of the room first, and I checked behind everything for cameras even though I knew there weren't any. The yellow looked perfect when we finished, like sunshine had exploded across the walls. 3 weeks later, Alejandro called to warn me that Peter's lawyer had filed for a sentence reduction hearing. Said I didn't have to go, but wanted me to know it was happening. I told him I'd be there. The hearing was set for the following month, and I spent every therapy session with Sang practicing what I'd do if I saw Peter again, how to breathe through the panic and stay grounded. The morning of the hearing, I put on the nicest clothes I owned, ones I'd picked myself, and my foster parents drove me to the courthouse. Peter was already sitting at the defense table when we walked in, wearing an orange jumpsuit now instead of his expensive suits. He looked older, grayer, smaller somehow without his house and money and power. I sat in the front row where he could see me, my foster parents on either side, and I didn't look away when he turned around. The judge reviewed his lawyer's motion for 10 minutes before denying it completely, said the evidence was too overwhelming for any reduction. Peter's shoulders dropped and he was let out without ever speaking, but seeing him powerless and contained made something tight in my chest finally loosen. 2 months passed before Sophia's grandmother called on a Saturday afternoon, said it was Sophia's 5th birthday, and she had something to tell me. I heard rustling, and then this tiny voice came through saying thank you for saving me, just those 4 words before her grandmother took the phone back. I sat on my bedroom floor crying for an hour, playing those 4 words over and over in my head. My foster dad started teaching me to drive the next week in empty parking lots, patient when I checked the mirrors 20 times before backing up, and needed to know exactly where all the exits were. The DMV test took 3 tries because I kept freezing up when other cars got too close. But the day I finally passed and held that plastic card with my picture on it felt like freedom. That same week, the news broke about the federal investigation with 43 arrests across 7 states, the biggest foster trafficking bust anyone had seen. I watched the coverage from my yellow room, feeling proud and sad and angry all at once as they showed pictures of the arrested people, some looking just as normal and respectable as Peter and Jess had. Catherine called the next day, asking if I'd speak at a conference for social workers about warning signs they'd missed. Said they could alter my voice and I wouldn't have to show my face. I spent 2 weeks writing out everything I wanted them to know, all the times adults should have noticed something was wrong but didn't because they trusted the system more than kids. The conference organizers recorded me reading it in Catherine's office, my voice shaking at first, but getting stronger as I talked about the cameras and the poker friends and how Peter had coached me on what to say to social workers. Catherine said 200 people would hear it at the conference next month. My grades came in the mail that same week, straight B's even though I'd missed so many classes for court stuff and therapy. My English professor had written a note on the transcript saying my essay about survival was the most powerful thing she'd read in 20 years of teaching, that my voice mattered and she hoped I'd keep writing. I bought a frame from the dollar store and hung it next to my bed where I could see it every morning. Sang brought up trying something new at our next session. Said maybe we could practice being in unfamiliar places overnight since I still struggled sleeping anywhere but my yellow room. My foster parents found a cabin an hour away, close enough to come home if I panicked but far enough to feel different. The first night there, I didn't sleep at all, just sat by the window watching for cars and checking the locks, but I made it through using the breathing exercises and ice packs and all the other tricks I'd learned from the support group. The next morning, Catherine called with news that made my hands shake. 3 more states had seen the conference video and started their own investigations into foster care placement schemes. She was getting calls every hour from prosecutors wanting details, but she was careful about what she shared, making sure my name stayed out of it while giving them enough to dig deeper. I watched the news coverage from my bedroom, seeing reporters stand outside state buildings talking about systemic failures and criminal networks. Catherine sent me updates through encrypted messages, screenshots of official investigation announcements from states I'd never even been to. The ripple was spreading wider than we'd imagined. That same week, I started sketching out ideas for a website on notebook paper. Foster kids needed a way to report stuff without going through the same people who might be hurting them. I drew boxes and arrows showing how reports could go straight to advocates like Catherine instead of getting buried in some CPS file. My foster dad saw my drawings and asked what I was working on. When I explained, he called his friend who worked at a tech company. 2 days later, I was sitting in a conference room with 3 programmers who listened to my idea and started taking notes. They said they'd build it for free after hearing what happened to me and the other girls. We spent 4 hours mapping out how it would work, with anonymous reporting options and direct connections to verified advocates. They promised a working version in 2 months. Meanwhile, Zenaida was filing paperwork at the courthouse every few days. She explained over coffee that we weren't just suing for money. Every lawsuit created legal precedent that would make it harder for this to happen again. She showed me stacks of documents with red flags that agencies had ignored for years. Each case we filed meant the next kid would have a stronger foundation to stand on. The civil suits named everyone from individual social workers to entire departments. She said some would settle quickly to avoid publicity, but others would fight. And that was okay, because fighting meant discovery, and discovery meant more evidence coming to light. My foster mom found me staring out the kitchen window one afternoon and asked if I wanted to help her with something outside. She'd bought seeds and soil and those little plastic starter pots. We sat on the back porch sorting through packets of radishes and lettuce and snap peas. She said these vegetables grew fast, that we'd see results in just a few weeks. I pushed seeds into dark soil with my finger, one by one, thinking about roots and growth and staying in one place long enough to see things bloom. We watered them together and set them in sunny spots on the windowsill. Every morning I checked for tiny green shoots breaking through. During our Tuesday night support group video call, the The girl I'd gotten closest to had news. She was starting law school in the fall, she said, inspired by survivors who fought back instead of just surviving. We all cheered and she held up the acceptance letter to the camera. Someone suggested celebrating properly, so we all went to our kitchens and came back with whatever dessert we could find. I had leftover birthday cake from my foster mom's birthday. She had cookies, another girl had ice cream. We ate together through our screens, talking about how she'd be able to help kids like us from the inside of the system. Catherine forwarded me an email the next week from a documentary filmmaker. They were making a film about foster care failures across the country and wanted my perspective. I read it 3 times before calling Catherine back. She said they were legitimate, had done good work before, and would protect my identity completely. After thinking about it for 2 days, I agreed to participate with my face blurred and voice changed. The film crew came to Catherine's office to record my interview. They asked about the pet door, about running barefoot in winter, about the poker friends and the cameras. I answered for 3 hours, my voice steady even when my hands weren't. They said my story would help people understand how predators use the system. The interviewer thanked me when we finished and said my truth mattered more than my privacy, and maybe she was right. Sang brought up something different at our next session. He wanted to reduce our meetings to every 2 weeks instead of weekly. I felt my chest tighten immediately, but he explained it meant progress, not abandonment. I was stable enough to need less intensive support, he said. We talked about the fear of being too okay to deserve help, how trauma made me think I had to stay broken to keep getting care. He promised the reduction was about growth, not giving up on me. The new schedule would start next month. A letter arrived at Zenaida's office with Peter's prison as the return address, but it wasn't from him. His mother had written asking to meet me, saying she had no idea what her son was capable of and wanted to apologize in person. Zenaida read it to me over the phone, her voice careful and neutral. She advised against meeting her, said it rarely helped and often hurt, but I kept thinking about where monsters come from, whether Peter was always this way, or if something made him like this. I told Zenaida I'd think about it, but really I was just pushing the decision away. 2 months passed faster than expected, and suddenly the website was ready to launch. The tech team had built everything I'd imagined and more. We started with testimonials from 15 survivors who wanted to share their stories. Catherine's team spent a week verifying each advocate who would receive reports. The night before launch, I couldn't sleep, thinking about all the kids who might finally have somewhere to turn. The site went live at midnight. Within the first hour, 12 reports came in. By the end of the first week, we had 200. Catherine's team was overwhelmed trying to respond to everyone, but this was the flood of truth we'd hoped for. Kids from every state were finding us, sharing things they'd never told anyone. Some reports were minor concerns, but others were emergencies that Catherine immediately forwarded to trusted contacts in law enforcement. The website was working exactly like we'd planned. The acceptance letter from State University arrived on a Thursday. The same day another envelope came from Sophia's grandmother. I opened the university letter first, my hands trembling as I read that I'd been accepted for next fall with a partial scholarship. Then I opened the second envelope to find a photo of Sophia in a tiny backpack standing outside a school building. Her first day of kindergarten, the note said. She was smiling huge, no breathing problems, no inhaler in sight. I taped both the letter and the photo to my bedroom wall, side by side. 2 futures we almost didn't have, but here we were, both moving forward. My foster parents brought up adoption over dinner the next week, sliding the paperwork across the table while I was eating mac and cheese. They said even though I'd age out in less than a year, they wanted me to have legal family who chose me. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth as I stared at the forms that would make them my real parents forever. I said yes before they finished explaining, my voice cracking on the single word that meant everything. They'd been sleeping outside my door on bad nights, never asking for details I wasn't ready to share. Now they wanted to be my parents legally, officially, permanently. We filled out the paperwork that night, their hands steady while mine shook with something that wasn't fear for once. 3 weeks later, the documentary aired on a major network. My face blurred and voice changed, but my story raw and real. I watched it alone in my room, hearing my own words about the pet door and frozen feet and Sophia's blue lips. Even disguised, I felt naked watching millions of people learn what happened in that house. Catherine called afterward to say 12 states had already started policy discussions because of the film. She said my vulnerability was changing laws, saving kids I'd never meet. The exposure felt worth it when she read me emails from social workers saying they'd look harder now. Alejandro got appointed to lead a federal task force on foster care crimes 2 days after the documentary aired. He called to ask if I'd consult occasionally, sharing survivor perspective on proposed policies. My voice would be in rooms where decisions got made, where kids like me usually never got heard. I agreed immediately, knowing my trauma could become someone else's protection. The next Saturday, my foster mom helped me paint my room for the second time since coming back. We added butterflies on the walls, bright yellow and orange ones like in the song Sophia used to sing. Neither of us cared about perfect lines or staying inside the pencil marks we'd drawn. Paint got on our clothes and in our hair as we worked side by side. She didn't ask why butterflies mattered, just helped me fill the walls with them. It was about claiming the space, making something beautiful where ugly memories tried to live. The adoption finalized on a Tuesday morning in the same courthouse where Peter got sentenced. The judge recognized me from the trial, her face softening as she signed the papers that made me legally theirs. My parents took me for ice cream afterward, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. We sat in the car eating mint chocolate chip while I stared at the certificate with my new legal name. Simple joy after so much complicated pain. Within days of the documentary airing, 6 of the other girls Peter hurt reached out through Catherine's office. We started a group chat, sharing dark jokes about our matching trauma and celebrating small victories. They understood the 2 a.m. wake-ups without me having to explain why sleep felt dangerous. We sent each other photos of good days and talked each other through bad nights. One girl was 32 now with kids of her own. Another was in law school. Seeing them build lives after Peter gave me hope I could too. I registered for full-time classes the following week, sitting with the disability services coordinator who already had my file. She understood why I needed to sit near exits and might have to leave suddenly sometimes. I chose social work as my major with criminal justice as a minor, the choice feeling like coming full circle. The woman helping me pick classes didn't say anything about my shaking hands when I signed the forms. 2 days later, another package arrived from Sophia's grandmother. this time containing a video file on a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop and watched Sophia sitting at a kitchen table with a simple picture book. She sounded out each word carefully, her finger following the text as she read about a cat who got lost. Her breathing was perfect, no wheezing or gasping between sentences. I saved the video to 3 different cloud drives, evidence of the life she got to have now. Catherine called that afternoon to offer me the paid internship position at her office. I'd work with victims while finishing school, learning advocacy from the inside while getting real experience. My parents drove me to sign the paperwork, both of them trying to hide their proud tears behind sunglasses. The office had a desk waiting for me with my name on a little placard. Catherine showed me the computer system and introduced me to the other advocates. I'd start the following Monday, 20 hours a week around my class schedule. Real work helping real kids who needed someone to believe them. The federal audit results came in that same week, the final report showing $63 million in misappropriated funds across the network. Alejandro called it just the tip of the iceberg when he phoned to discuss my upcoming testimony. I'd testify to Congress via secure video link about what those numbers meant in human cost. He helped me prepare my statement, focusing on facts while including enough personal detail to make it real. The testimony was scheduled for the following month, giving me time to practice reading it without crying. Sang showed up at my next appointment with a meditation app on his phone and a small cushion. He sat on the floor and patted the space next to him, explaining we needed to practice facing December without it eating up the whole month. I copied his breathing pattern, counting to 4 on the inhale, holding for 4, releasing for 4. My hands kept shaking at first, but after 20 minutes they went still. He had me picture the bad dates as boxes I could open and close instead of floods that drowned everything. We practiced 3 times a week until I could sit with the anniversary date in my head without my heart racing. The survivor sisters from the group chat started planning something different for the 2-year mark. One of them found a rental house with 6 bedrooms, cameras we controlled and exits from every room. We all chipped in $200 and booked it for a long weekend. The place had a huge kitchen where we cooked together, making way too much food while sharing the dark jokes only we understood. We stayed up until 3 in the morning playing board games and painting each other's nails terrible colors. Nobody asked why someone needed to check the locks, or why another girl slept in the closet. We just existed without having to explain ourselves. Alejandro called while we were there with news that made me sit down hard on the kitchen floor. The federal investigation into Peter found cryptocurrency accounts with almost $2 million, plus connections to trafficking rings in 4 countries. He was facing new charges that carried mandatory life sentences. The other girls gathered around me as I processed that Peter would never get out, would die in prison where he belonged. Catherine arranged for me to speak at a social work conference the following month. I stood behind a screen so they couldn't see my face, but my voice went out clear to 800 people. I talked about missed signs, how predators use the system, what questions to ask kids who seem fine on the surface. My voice only shook once when I mentioned Sophia's breathing. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes, and I stood there behind the screen crying, while strangers clapped for truth they needed to hear. The website Catherine helped me build passed 10,000 users that same week. Survivors signed up to share resources, advocates joined to learn better practices, and even some social workers who wanted to fix their mistakes registered. Each notification meant another person who wouldn't stay silent, another kid who might get believed. The code I'd written late at night while unable to sleep had become something bigger than my own pain. Sophia's grandmother sent a video right before Christmas that made my parents cry too. Sophia had decorated sugar cookies and held one up to the camera shaped like a butterfly, saying she made it for the girl who saved her. She didn't know my name or my face, but she knew I existed, and that was enough. Her breathing was perfect in the video. No wheeze or struggle, just a happy kid making cookies. The grades posted online showing I'd made Dean's List my first full semester back. My criminal justice professor sent an email asking if I'd guest lecture about victim advocacy. I stood in front of 40 students the next week and told them the real version, not the textbook one. Nobody moved for the entire hour. Some of them stayed after to ask how they could help kids like me. My parents surprised me on the adoption anniversary with a photo album they'd been making secretly. Every page showed something from the past year since I'd come back to them. The hospital discharge photo where I looked half dead. The first time I smiled at dinner. My high school graduation. The adoption papers being signed. They'd documented me rebuilding without me knowing, creating evidence that I was more than what happened to me. Catherine called me into her office the week after my internship ended with a job offer. Junior advocate position with full salary and benefits. She handed me business cards with my name printed on them and showed me to my own desk with a computer and phone. I ran my fingers over those business cards 100 times that first day, proof I existed professionally after Peter tried to erase me. That night, something impossible happened without me even trying. I went to bed at 11 and woke up at 6 in the morning, realizing I'd slept through 2 in the morning for the first time since the escape. No checking locks, no sitting by the door, no waking up ready to run. My mom found me in the kitchen crying into my cereal and sat with me while I tried to explain that they were good tears, that my body had finally believed it was safe enough to sleep through the danger hour. The call from Alejandro came 2 weeks later while I was studying for finals, his voice excited as he explained the federal task force had drafted something called Sophia's Law that would protect foster kids' medical rights, and it was heading to the House floor next month. I watched the vote on C-SPAN from Catherine's office, both of us crying when it passed 412 to 3, knowing those numbers meant real kids would get their medicine now. Moving day came right after graduation, my parents helping me carry boxes into the first floor apartment I'd picked specifically for its 3 exits, and the doorbell camera I could control from my phone. They understood why I needed my own space after everything, why independence mattered more than safety nets, and when they handed me a box of new locks as a housewarming gift, I hugged them hard enough to hurt. The apartment was small but mine. Every window had a clear view to the street, and I spent the first night testing all the locks twice before finally sleeping on the couch where I could see both doors. September brought a manila envelope from Sophia's grandmother with her first grade school photo inside, those bright eyes staring at the camera with a huge smile, and no sign of the inhaler she used to need every hour. I framed it immediately and put it on my desk at work where I'd see it every time I answered the phone to help another survivor navigate the system. The 2-year anniversary of the escape passed without fanfare, just a normal Tuesday of work and classes and dinner with my parents at their kitchen table. Sang had warned me anniversary dates might hit hard, but this one felt manageable, the trauma part of my story now instead of the whole thing, though I still checked the locks before bed. Spring semester brought news through our Survivor group chat that 3 of us were graduating college this May, and we started planning to attend each other's ceremonies because chosen family understands the weight of walking across that stage when statistics said we'd never make it. The foster parent application process took 6 months, but the approval letter finally came, specifically for emergency placements of teens fleeing abuse. And I spent a weekend setting up the spare room with multiple locks, night lights, and making sure the path to all exits stayed clear. Catherine announced her retirement at the staff meeting, then shocked everyone by recommending me as her replacement even though I was only 21 and barely 2 years into the job. The interview panel included 2 survivors from our website, who understood that lived experience mattered more than traditional credentials, and their unanimous vote made me the youngest department head the agency had ever had. 3 years to the day since I pushed Sophia through that pet door, I drove to the old house one last time, parking across the street to watch a new family's kids playing in the yard where I used to rake leaves for Peter. The garage door was closed, but I knew the pet door was still there behind fresh paint, that 4-inch space that saved us both, and I touched the wall once through the fence, whispering thank you to the escape route that changed everything. The drive home took me past the police station where I'd burst through the doors carrying Sophia, past the hospital where they treated our injuries, past the courthouse where Peter got his sentence, each landmark a piece of the path from that frozen night to this moment. My apartment door had 3 locks now, and I checked them all before bed, not from fear anymore, but from habit, from knowing that safety is something you build one day at a time. The foster care website had 15,000 users now, survivors and advocates and social workers all learning from each other, proof that pain could become purpose if you survived long enough to transform it. Tomorrow there'd be a new emergency placement arriving, a 16-year-old girl whose story sounded too familiar, and I'd already put fresh sheets on the bed and stocked the fridge with easy foods that didn't require asking permission. Catherine's old office would become mine on Monday, those business cards with my name finally reading department head instead of junior advocate, evidence that the girl who crawled through a pet door had built something from those bloody footprints in the snow. My parents called to say goodnight like they did every evening now, never asking if I was okay, just reminding me they loved me and would see me for Sunday dinner. The Survivor group chat buzzed with graduation plans and job offers and small victories that only we understood the weight of, each notification a reminder that we were more than our worst nights. I thought about those other girls from Peter's past sometimes, wondering if they ever found their own versions of peace, if they had people who believed them now, if they knew their running had mattered even when no one listened. Sophia would be 7 next month, and her grandmother promised another photo, another piece of evidence that at least one of us got the childhood she deserved, that medical neglect couldn't steal everything if someone intervened in time. That covers everything. No fluff, just what works. Hit subscribe for more tutorials that respect your intelligence and your time.